Sorry, Dad. It's good.
Did this show on the road?
Where's Don? I have the gavel. I just couldn't turn my. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the City Council's Urban Affairs Committee meeting to order. It's February 23rd, 7 o'clock. We have two items on our agenda. The first one was an additional item added on. It is order number 23-100-8816, a request for approval of a flat wall sign by Harry's Construction, 561 Boston Post Road East, within the Wayside Zoning District. I had asked this to be referred to committee because when I looked at the site, I was concerned that because it is in Wayside, we have control over it. I didn't want this to turn into a construction storage yard. So I wanted to make sure that they had a business certificate within the city of Marlborough for a business, which they didn't have when I checked, but they do have now. And that they understood that they cannot be storing materials at the back of the building or store their trucks there overnight. So it is my understanding that the building department has worked with them. They do have their business certificate. As I said, what they don't have is the occupancy permit. So I think, unless anybody else has concerns, I'm satisfied and would suggest that we approve this pending final occupancy permit. Councilor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I don't have any issues with this, but I understand it's not even a backlit sign. It's just a normal, nowadays, an old-fashioned sign.
Correct.
So, you know, I know the building well. It was part of Bob Velch's business for a while, and I think it looks like he's just found someone else to go into this. So, aside from the condition for occupancy, I don't think there's any other issues that need to be, you know, behind the building is the park, and that has its own parking issues. So I'm not sure if there's going to be any parking in the back at this point.
All right, anybody else with concerns or questions? Motion?
Motion to approve order number 23-100-8816.
Pending the final issuance of the occupancy permit. All right, so it has been moved and seconded to approve this, again, pending the final issuance of an occupancy permit. Is there discussion? All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, thank you very much for indulging me and making sure that that was all good. The second item on our agenda is order number 22-100-721. It's a communication from Solicitor Grossfield on behalf of Councilor Roby regarding the proposed amendments to Chapter 650 zoning relative to certain provisions concerning mixed use and affordable housing. So this did go to the Planning Board. We had a public hearing on December 19th. The Planning Board had their public hearing. We received their letter stating at its regularly scheduled meeting on 12/19/2022, the Planning Board took the following action. On a motion by Mr. LaVenture, seconded by Mr. Rust, the board voted to send a favorable recommendation to the City Council on the above referenced proposed zoning amendment with the following recommendations. That affordability be defined within the zoning amendment, that the possibility that the amendment may cause impediments to site development be considered, and that the council consider that this may change when the MBTA information is provided. And it carried 7-0. So that is for the record. And then Councilor Ossing and I both met with the mayor trying to get some of his concerns. He did get invited to this meeting. He felt that until he had more information, he wasn't comfortable meeting. I pushed for this because of the time frame that we're in. We had 90 days from the public hearing before this just disappears and we have to start over again, which means that we need to act by our March 13th council meeting, or we start from scratch. So although I know there may be some concern with this, there may be parts that get removed, or there may be new parts added at a future meeting. hopefully we can come to some agreement tonight on what is agreeable to us and then would be agreeable by everybody else. So you all should have the communication from the solicitor that he went through and put everything in proper form. I understand that there are a couple of concerns specific to the number of, I removed the, or my recommendation was to remove, it originally had two separate numbers, developments of 20 or more, and then 19 and under, where the council could, but didn't have to add affordability. So I'm going to just open this up to members for discussion. Anybody want to go first? I was with Councilor Navin. I thought maybe you would raise your hand, but all right, so you two, I'll argue. I'll go ladies first. Councilor Wagner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would personally like to see, I'd like the consistency. I think it's important that housing developments, and based on number, whether it's mixed use or just housing, should have a condition of affordability. I also support not having contractors buy their way out of it. What I don't have enough information on, like I would like to set a number, say 8, but that is completely arbitrary. I don't know how that might impact development. So if we really had that, if you were building 8 or more units and, you know, percentage, 15% had to be affordable, would that impact the feasibility of the project? Like, I wouldn't want to set a condition that then becomes, I don't know what impact that would have on like feasibility of a project and how to find that out. So that's
one of the things that again, that would be one of those whole lot more information that maybe the mayor would have, but I understand that there is an ability through one of the organizations or a master in the law for a nonprofit and for-profit builder to go to them to get funding for a project, which then reduces the concern of us that if we make them have affordable, they're saying, well, then I can't build it because I can't get my income back. So that may be a way, and I don't know that we need to put that in here. I think developers are probably smart enough to already know that that's there. I'm not sure that the city's ever had anybody come in with that sort of funding. Continue, Councilor Wagner.
So continue, so I've seen other communities, because I found that interesting, because that seems to be the dilemma of, it'd be great to wave a wand and say, you know, you build these units and some of the rents have to be like 800 or whatever. I think then we're wading into rent control. But I have seen communities where there is a partnership with the state community, and it isn't just a straight up, somebody comes in and builds it. It's a project that was intentionally meant to be affordable housing for the community that becomes a partnership. But, so this feels like it's separate from that already exists, and this feels like it's separate. So I know planning brought up defining what affordable is. It's my understanding that that's done at the state level in state law, that we can't define that. And then I'm watching what's happening in Boston, and they can't even set rent caps without state legislative approval. So it's not something, it feels like that part we can't do, but we can determine, I guess, percentage and what kind of units will qualify it in our municipality that'll be required to have affordable units.
All right, and that's why I had sent around, and I realized it was late when I did it, but I found language from Waltham that they kind of are using the ability, the income is the income, it's set by HUD, so we don't have any way to change that. And unfortunately, we're part of Boston's grouping, which probably puts us in a higher bracket than other communities, except for the other communities in the same area. But we can take that and then use a percentage of that to base our rents on. And there's a whole schedule that's available that you take the percent of income, which gives you a number that the rent would be. And that changes every year because the income changes every year. So it's not anything we'd ever want to put into the document, but it would be a number that anybody could find. So that's why I kind of liked Waltham's language, where they had 80% of the area income for a third of the units, and then households earning less than 50% would qualify for, I'm reading this too fast without, so what is it? Households earning less than 80% within the standard metropolitan statistic, that at least a third of the units sold would be priced within the price limits targeted for households earning less than 50% of the area. I'm confusing everybody. But there was a way to have different incomes versus everybody getting the same. And I think that was the conversation that confused me with the mayor, because he was talking about their Section 8 housing where they can only set one percentage, I guess. But I'm going to go to Councilor Doucette unless you still.
His name first.
You, oh, okay, sorry. Councilor Navin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would echo what Councilor Wagner said, of being supportive of the efforts, and thank you for taking this on. It is certainly not straightforward, and so you deserve a lot of credit for trying to tackle this. I agree. I would like to see increased affordable housing, and I would like to see the larger developments kind of, you know, have their feet held a little bit on this, and so I am also supportive of taking the buyout clause out of this. I do have the same concern about the number. I think it could infringe upon some development if we do go ahead and take the number off completely. The statistics, or the statute from the city of Waltham that you sent around actually does use 8 as their number, which I think, you know, is around the right number. I would hate to see a position where you have a small lot and, you know, some small developer decides to, you know, take the opportunity on and, you know, clean up a lot and, you know, maybe put in 3 or 4 townhomes, but then the economics of it would not be able to work, you know, because they were not able to do that. So, you know, I think something along the lines of 8, you know, more than 8, or 8 or less. I think the city of Waltham says, let me just read it here, that have fewer than 8 dwelling units shall be exempt from the affordable housing requirements. I would be supportive of some language like that. And then I would also be supportive, I think that the 50%, it's very clever the way they worded it, so that we don't get into the numbers, we don't get into, you know, saying this year if you make this amount of income it would be X, Y, and Z. You know, we leave that to the equations that are set forth by HUD. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Does everybody like that language that I believe is in the 9.12? And solicitor, you don't have a copy of this, do you? Oh, okay. Because yes, please, because I know the concern that I had with you was how much we amend this, does it then become something that we have to have a brand-new public hearing for? So hopefully you can advise us on where we're safe. But I think if we take where in number 2 on the 650-26 affordable housing is A, and then it has a number 1, developments. If we stick that sentence, all proposed developments that have fewer than 8 dwelling units shall be exempt from affordable housing requirements, and just put that right at the very beginning.
Chair?
Councilor Ossing.
So in our current zoning, it has item Bravo 1, developments of 20 units or more, we scratched out
Right.
20. So if you wanted, I don't know if that would be the appropriate way to stick, whether it's 8 or some other number, for the committee's consideration.
So rather than to have that sentence, just have developments of 8 or more, and then, it had it before because we had that language in J2, or number 2, I'm not sure where, that developments of 19 or fewer, we could do affordable. So that I had recommended be removed, and I think it would be appropriate to keep it removed. I guess whatever is simpler, if it's simpler to just say instead of deleting the of 20 units or more, have it say developments of 8 units or more? Councilor Doucette.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the issue I have with the number 8 is 1/8 of 8 is 12.5%. So we're looking at 15% typically for units, so I think a bigger number would be beneficial than 8, you know. I thought the Waltham one actually showed 18%, 18
Well,
units or more.
It does in their other language where it talks about,
Okay, not 12, okay.
provided,
So that-
however, if a proposed development will
Oh, that's where
contain
the
more
eight-
than
okay.
18, it's a higher percentage.
Okay.
So-
So, you know, if someone's doing 8 units, that means one of them's gonna be affordable if we round it up. So
Well,
if it
it would
shows
be-
10, we could say 10 or more, in which case then it's 1.
It would be
Yeah.
more than 8, so it'd have to be 9.
9, yeah, right. So 9 units would get you close to 15%, just numbers-wise, just make it match.
Is 9, I mean, that's what it would be if we said
More than 8,
developments of,
9 or more?
well, this says of 20 or more, so if we say
So-
9 or more,
So, Madam Chair, if you notice, the Waltham one takes a little bit of pain in what I call the rounding method, that you have to, you know, have some sort of guidelines, because if, just say it's 8, so 15% of 8 is 0.8, so you would have to say, okay, we'll assume 1 of the 8 units. You had to have, so they go through the language that says, here's the rounding criteria. If it's less, if it comes out to 1.2, then it's just 1. If it comes out to 1.6, then it's 2 units you're required. I mean, we could set it any way we want, but that's how the Waltham folks, they have a section in there that painstakingly says how to teach people to do math.
which, because I noticed in the document that we just approved at our last meeting, that was from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, had the, if you looked at the math in that one, they rounded up.
Yep.
So,
Well, again, the committee can pick whatever, you can just say, we're gonna round up, and just leave it that simple. I mean, it's-
and I don't know if that's language we need to have specifically, I guess, Mr. Solicitor.
Sure, Madam Chair, no, thank you. So, so a couple of things that I wanted to mention to the committee is, there's over 100 examples of these types of ordinances in Massachusetts, and they vary quite a bit. And they vary in terms of exactly what you're talking about tonight, the minimum number of units that trip the affordable housing requirement. They vary in terms of the percentage of area median income that's going to qualify for, you know, acquiring one of the units. And I think all of that weighs in, and this is less legal and more policy, in terms of the economics of development, as the committee was talking about earlier. When you look around, you know, the region, even in the news over the last few months, there's several communities, I think Framingham, Malden, Revere, they've all been looking at either adopting inclusionary zoning or changing what's on the books. And you'll see there's a lot of modeling of what, is it on? Sorry. Thank you.
Either, so.
There's a lot of modeling of what those inputs are. So if you take 8 units, you take 30 units, however many number you're taking, and then you take the development, and whether you round up or round down on the number of units, and then what percentage, you know, where do the rent or the ownership pricing need to be to meet the requirements of the ordinance. Those are all inputs that can be modeled, obviously, by a planning or economic type of consultants, because they will, as the committee's talking about, impact what the result of the ordinance is. So as it exists today, it pretty much just defaults to DHCD, which is the state's requirements to get the units on the subsidized housing inventory list. And that is one question that I would pose to the committee, is whether that's the objective or not, because in some communities, they don't all tailor their ordinance to do that. They may say some of the units they'd like to get on that list. Some of the units are at a higher level of income that won't qualify for that list. Some of them are at a lower level than 80%. So there's a few variations there, certainly in terms of the language. You know, that sentence could be rewritten to say whatever the number the committee would like, but I just want to note sort of some of that general context for those, you know, thinking about that number.
And I don't know about the rest of the committee, but for me, going forward, I want them all to count in perpetuity as a unit that fits that count, and I think that's where hopefully we could mimic some of Waltham's language. And you had your hand up before Councilor Navin had made his points, and I was sort of making points and then going around. So I don't know if you had any other comments, Councilor Doucette?
As you made a comment about in perpetuity, I actually have no issues with striking the reference to 99 years versus perpetuity and just make it for in perpetuity. But that's up to whether or not the rest of the council agrees.
And where do you see it for 99 years?
Let's see, period of affordability, item F on what, page 2?
Oh, yes, it does.
Yeah, affordable units, minimum 99 years or in perpetuity.
Minimum.
So,
Which I guess if we adopted Waltham's, we probably wouldn't keep that, but that's one of those. I didn't know that anything else existed, so, and I think that's what that's the current language, so.
yeah, well, there's one of the developments on the other side of town, it's 40 years or something, which I found strikingly short.
Why
Something like
would you
this.
go to all of that work? So that, I'm going to star that one to make sure if we can agree to some of this other language. Councilor Landers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I'm backing up a little bit, but do we have any idea how many affordable units we have in Marlborough?
We do, but I don't have that number in front of me.
I'm not asking, I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot, but
I
the
know we have
reason I
enough.
say that, we've had some discussions out of Panera Bread on Sunday morning, and we need more affordable units. We need more affordable units, and we probably do. And, you know, I've been on long enough that every project, and I think Councilor Wagner brought up something, when we did the ice house back 5-6 years ago, I voted, I think, for it. I have to look it up, but I wasn't comfortable that we allowed them, I think, at $50,000 or $60,000 per unit to get out of the affordable thing. As I say, I think I voted for it at the time. I don't like that, and I think Councilor Wagner, that's what you were saying there. But now, just some of the examples we have. Now, the couple new Italia out somewhere on the drive, is that all affordable?
I'm sorry, which one?
Italia out on...
Talia was a friendly 40B, so I believe they all are.
I think they all, that's what I was gonna say. I've been through there a couple of times. In fact, I think we toured it a year ago. It's quite nice. Now, the new one that we're gonna have a social event at in May, that's outstanding. I mean, I walked through there and I couldn't believe some of the things they have. Now, I think that's 15%,
That's 10,
only 10?
I believe. I had a number somewhere. And I think that was he didn't have to have them, but allowed us to do it that way. Where's my number?
The only reason I bring this up, Madam Chair, this has been a conversation with, I guess, some of my friends and enemies, maybe they're my enemies, I don't know, and they're kind of getting after me, or after us. And I don't know if the affordable bit is, you know, is it that big a topic in Marlborough?
I think what I'm hearing is that whole issue of what's affordable to you may not be affordable to me, because that magic number of 1,000, where's my magic number? $140,200 is the area median income. How many people do you know in Marlborough make that? So for somebody who's making 60,000, even just one single person, they can't afford the rent that's required, so it's,
Is that 140 based on Boston?
that's the number, there's
I think
Boston
it is.
and
It
lots
is.
of other surrounding communities. The language that we put in the Green District was 10% shall be made available at rental units at affordable prices to renters whose annual income does not exceed 80% of the area median income. So if you notice in Waltham, they have two different groupings. They have 80%, but then they also go to 50%, which changes that amount tremendously. 80% for a studio is $1,957. If you go to 50%, a studio is $1,227.
I could see that happening in Waltham, because Waltham is kind of a complex city. You can almost divide it in half. you
I
know.
think Marlborough has a lot of those same, they
Yeah,
have a
but
lot of,
Waltham, you have a lot of the high-tech, some of them have changed Polaroids left there and so forth. But they do have a lot of, all you gotta do is drive along 128, and you say, my God, it's amazing what has happened in Waltham. But then, I grew up not too far from there. There used to be a lot of farms at one time too. And as a result, not that there's farms there now, but you certainly have two distinct levels of income. Now Marlborough, I'd have to look at the figures again, but, we have quite a separation of income here.
I think we do. And,
But, all you gotta do is look around,
yep.
yeah?
So
But I'd be curious to see how many, if we could come up with that figure, are we lacking?
well, we have
Affordable
enough
housing.
that we're no 40B friend, well, a friendly could come in if we wanted to let them, but a 40B can't come in because we meet the 10%.
Yeah,
So-
since I've been on, I think we've always made that 10%.
Counselor Ossing, I think, has a number.
Okay, here we go.
All right, so get your pens and paper out.
Okay.
So the 2020 census data says the housing inventory in Marlborough is 17,547 units. So 10% of that is 1,755. Okay, so that means you have to meet our 10%, you have to have 1,755 affordable units. According to the latest CDA data that I have, we have 1,857 units. Okay, so 1,857, that gives a surplus of 102 units. Okay? But to Councilor Doucette's point, the list shows that various units come off between 2021 and 2029 because they weren't put in perpetuity.
Right.
All right? So you want, the good news is they don't run the data again until 2030. Okay, so we're good till 2030. We don't have to do anything if we don't want to, right? Right? But in 2030, they're gonna run the numbers again, and the ones that are coming off are gonna come off, and then if we put any on, which we are for some of the other things. So, Council Landers, we're above our 10% threshold right now, which is good. But if can I continue on a similar topic, separate from inventory? So our current ordinance has a minimum of 20 units, requires 15%, and as Councilor Wagner pointed out, allows a buyout, all right? So the question you ask yourself is, do you like that? So what Councilor Roby says is, she's not excited about the buyout, and I don't want to say excited about the 20 units, but wanted to make it apply to all. And I'm going to save the mixed-use conversation for later. I'm not going to touch that. So the question you have is, as we approve developments in the city of Marlborough, what do you want to have for an affordable component? We found that the buyout just, the concept of buyout, and God bless Arthur Bergeron, was that we were going to go build, we're going to take that money and go build things. you can't build a tent with the money that we're getting for these places, all right? So if a real buyout number is about $500,000 a unit, because what you'd want to be doing is going out and buying single and two-family houses and converting them to, put them under the CDA control and let the CDA own them, and that's how you would really do that. You wouldn't, 50 grand, I can't put a porch on my house for 50 grand, right? I mean, so it's kind of, so it's kind of silly. So what Council Roby has tried to do is say, okay, we recognize this option of buyout's not good. The challenge with the buyout then puts us in a box that we all got to stand together and say, it's going to be 15%, there's no wiggle room. We've seen developers come before this council, and will be coming before the council shortly, that cry they can't make the numbers work with 15%, right? They just, the world's coming to an end. We've had other builders come before us and say, okay, that's fine, if you want 15%, all right, we'll go 20. Any projects do you recall any projects that will go as high as 20%? I think there's one on Route 20 that's proposed to be built, right? McGee Farm. All right, so builders, they'll always come before us and cry poor. If I were a builder, I'd do the exact same thing. Why wouldn't you? All right? But as a community, the decision of what Council Roby's put before you all is, what do you want to do going forward? Because we can set it today, and we can change it tomorrow. I mean, because we're going to learn more when the mayor comes down with the housing direction, because if you're watching the news, from Brookline to Middletown, towns are starting to figure out this is impactful, and it's going to change the way communities look, and they're not too happy. All right, so we're going to get, the mayor's doing his homework right now, and he's going to be coming before us with information here shortly. But what Council Roby has, I feel, is getting rid of a thing that we really shouldn't be using, which is the buyout. But the part of me that gets nervous about it is, now what if it's a really good project and a builder wants to come and can't meet it, but we say, hey, ordinance says 15%, you're stuck. So that's just my pitch, Council Roby. I'll let you, I'm done.
And I guess I put that in there because, to me, the only way we would have the ability to make it higher was a special permit. And a special permit, we can put the language we want. If they don't like it, then they'll pull back from the approval of the special permit. But that's also, I added in the site plan piece. Site plan doesn't need a special permit. And hopefully that would go away at a future amendment. Council Wagner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For me, this is a policy decision. So there's what gets us not in trouble at the state level. We want to keep that 10%, but so that's, to me, is not the guiding principle. The guiding principle of what's best for Marlborough, and having a mixed array of housing is so important. I wish we did have the ability to have single-family homes that we could help young families get started in home ownership. I wish we could set, the real rents, the missing piece here is the people that make minimum wage and a little bit more, and rents that are like $800 to $1,200 are almost non-existent. But we don't have that ability, but I think we can at least send a clear message that we require a certain percentage to be, by state definition at least, affordable, to have at least a mix. We have to think about who makes the city what it is. If our professionals, our firefighters and our teachers and people working in all those, and the businesses around here can't afford to live here, what are we doing? So to me, it has its quality of life factor. I don't want to send it so stringent that no one can ever build in this city. I want to be realistic, but also the developers that come in and cry poor and want to make a wider margin of profit. Well, I'd rather work with the ones that are more of a partnership, because we don't have endless land, and every time we talk about a housing development, we have a big conversation around the impact. So as we put these new developments in place and approve them, I'd like to see them also come with a benefit to the community, and not just keep eating up land, adding traffic, adding more people, adding more stress on our schools, and it just only goes to the people that make a boatload of money and not think about the whole fabric of the community. So for me, I think the buyout needs to go. It's not really having impact, as President Ossing said, if we could use that money to really have we're not doing anything with it. That's just a way to skirt the requirements from my perspective. So I like the 50%. If we could have the 2 levels, I don't understand the legal impact, how they did that, because then how is that not more rent, doesn't that fall into rent control category? I don't understand how we can do that, but certainly setting the number, getting rid of the buyout is, I'm all for that. And from a policy perspective, for the benefit of the community.
Yeah, it's my understanding it's not rent control. It's just the language that you put in, because it actually does change every year because the incomes change every year, so the rent number also changes. And I know Councilor Ossing made up the point that we're going to have to do language for the 3A that just passed, but at least my own understanding is it would be a whole separate new number in the code and would just be specifically for wherever we zone it, and it would be by right, but we can put affordable in it if we want to. So that piece would just cover that area that we zone. So to me, that's a discussion for the future and really shouldn't impact what we do now for everybody else in the city. So I don't know if we want to get to some specificity in the number that we're talking about for units that count. I heard some sort of agreement for 9. Is it easier to just have it be developments of 9 or more units, just get added back in for number 1 instead of that line being deleted? And then, I don't know if we need an A number of affordable units to be there, or if it would just be starting with the development.
Depending on what the committee's objective is, if the committee has a number in mind, I could come back with additional language to address one of the points raised about the fractional issue, which I think should be added into this, and play around with 2, number 2, and basically 1.
I think there was language within Waltham's that, if you have a copy of that, it was basically just a sentence. I found it. Where was it? I had it somewhere. If when applying a specified percentage to calculate a required number of units, the resulting number of dwelling units includes a fraction of a unit. This fraction, if equal to or greater than half, shall be rounded up to the next whole number.
Yeah, something like that. Yep.
So I guess that could go at the end of, if we want to mimic Waltham's actual, if we're saying more than 9, but then they also have that the applicant, it's 15% for the total, and then if it's more than 18, it becomes 20%. Do people like that, or do we want to just stick with one number for anything over 9? Councilor Nabin?
Madam Chair, thank you. So if we're talking, in essence, though, we're talking about the same, and I was not a math major, so anyone jump in here, but whether it's 8 units or 9 units, we're still talking about the same amount of affordable units once you do the calculation, because it's round up or round down.
It sounds like it, yes, because I also am not a math major. I'd have to.
So I tried to do the math like 6 times before I opened my mouth, and then I realized that I was just gonna, we'd be here all night.
Are we going back to 8?
I personally, I like 8. I think, it's a nice round number, but also it keeps it fairly small. Not that it's the difference of 1 unit, but I like that because it still kind of holds people's feet to the fire. 8's already, I think, a fairly large number, for something for when you're talking about the economies of scale and someone who's either selling or renting here in the city, which still continues to enjoy, as we all know when we see our property taxes, excellent values and very high rental rates. So I personally am comfortable with that. As far as the difference for the larger piece of a unit, I'm comfortable. I don't know if 18 is the right number to go from 15 to 20, but I am comfortable that as a, if we're gonna get, more large developments that are coming in here, I do think that folks are gonna be able to make it work. We've seen some of these developments and people are coming in with high-end apartments and they're not coming in with condos and they're gonna sell. They're looking at long-term profits. I don't think that, despite what we sometimes hear during presentations, I don't think it's a deal breaker. And I think if sometimes we were a little more forceful on just this particular component, I think that people would agree because I think it's an attractive city and I think these developments are very lucrative. As Councilor Landers said, the Green District put together a very nice product and they're charging a very high premium for that. I imagine that, for a big footprint like that, going up 5% is not out of line. I don't know where folks are. I think a little bit higher than 18 to make that jump, but I am comfortable with the two rates.
Anybody want to go with 20? Councilor Wagner, do you have a thought?
Those would be the three things. I support actually the 8% at 15%. I think 18 or more, jumping up to 20% would be good. I also would include the no buyout and adding in perpetuity. So those three things.
Yeah, we could definitely get rid of the, so I guess my sense would be we could keep the A where it says number of affordable units, because they have assignment, and then copy what Waltham has, except we don't want to include sell, I don't think, because we're talking about rental condos? I guess we're both, don't we? Sometimes people come in with condos, so if we keep this, and then instead of their last sentence, it says resulting fractions of dwellings shall be treated, just add in that sentence that I read instead of section 9.145. Just add that language into this, and then leave out that other part. Councilor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. In my development, which is all condos, houses, there is affordable housing in that development, even though it's condos. And it's restricted so that the people who sell have to sell as affordable housing, as a condo. So I think it's important as far as condos go, any type of housing, that's included as affordable. The only alternative, which I don't see much of at this point, is basically completely standalone houses, which I don't think there's enough property left in Marlborough to do a big development like that.
Well, and the Jefferson Street is condos, but the ones
Yes.
that we will potentially approve on the corner of Lincoln and Cashman, they didn't want to do condos.
They're doing
so
apartments, right?
They're doing apartments similar in size of number of units, but, so I guess we do need to keep that sell. Is adding that kind of language into this enough that it would trigger requiring us to re-advertise?
So, Madam Chair, it might. I have to look more closely at that language. And one of the other pieces I just want to mention, I'm not familiar with Waltham's complete zoning, but what I will say is some places, they're putting bonuses into their zoning for development in exchange for the affordable housing. So for example, you may be able to build a higher density, less parking, less setbacks, things like this.
They do have that in this, I think, and that's why I'm picking and choosing what I want to copy. I don't think that's mentioned at all in this particular piece of the language. It's really talking about the numbers. The count as affordable. But then there is an additional piece that I had highlighted that talks about the difference between 80% and 50%. So I guess that we'll deal with the first piece first and then go to that part. So is everybody comfortable with, go back to my developments of 8 or more units would be in Roman numeral 2A1. And then A would read number of affordable units, and then copy the language less the assignment of 9.142 from Waltham's language through to, and not including the resulting fractions, but include the sentence that they have that describes how to deal with fractions. And did you don't have a copy of this, is that right? I know it, I just sent it today, and I don't know if Karen CC'd you, it would be
I think I do. have a copy
highlighted
of this.
stuff.
Yep.
So it really just says, the applicant shall sell, lease, or otherwise assign at reduced prices a specific number of dwelling units which equal 15% of the total in the proposed development, and then provided, however, if a proposed development will contain more than 18 dwelling units, the applicant shall sell, lease, or assign at reduced prices a specific number which equals 20% rather than 50% of the total.
So, Madam Chair, so I may, if the concepts is what the committee would like, I may play with that wording, because some of this is dealing with things that we don't, like assignment, we don't have in our ordinance that.
Right,
as a
yeah, so
concept,
you
yeah.
put it in the
Right.
correct verbiage, and I'm sure you could clean it up, even if we had to meet another time to have us look at it, or if everybody's okay with him, if it's the concept that we agreed to. So that works for committee members?
Yep.
All right, then if we get to the other part of this highlighted in there where it talks about specifically where no state, federal, or local funds are used, the prices shall be consistent with price limits used by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development targeted for households earning less than 80% of the area median income within the standard metropolitan statistical area that would include Marlborough, provided further that at least 1/3 of the units sold, leased, or otherwise assigned shall be priced consistent with price limits used by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development targeted for households earning less than 50% of the area median income. And then the affordable housing restriction will run with the land, enforced in perpetuity. They would have to have a deed restriction and comply with DHCD requirements. And I'm sure that Solicitor Grossfield could make sure that that fit our language. So that, to me, is the part that I like, that some of them can be 80, and then some of them can be 50. We can keep them all the same if that's the preference of the committee. I see a hand, Councilor Wagner.
I think that would be a wonderful addition. I support that split of 80 and 50, as you just stated.
Madam Chair?
Oh, Councilor.
Yeah. I also think that's a great idea, the 50%. I've noticed just working at Home Depot, there's a lot of workers at Home Depot and customers at Home Depot that are under the 50%, and a lot of them end up with commutes from, Leominster or Fitchburg to come working here because they can't afford to live here. So it's the great trade-off of, either you're paying rent or you're paying for gas, anything we can do to help quality of life and keeping the community, people who work in the community, living in the community, I think is important for the community overall, so.
Councilor Navin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think, I think this 80%, considering the, being looped in with the Boston region and looking at what that number is and looking at the actual median household income of the city of Marlborough's residents, right? I mean, the 80% is pretty easy to trip, so designating some a little bit further for people who fall even further below that income level, I think, is critical. I do also want to echo what Councilor Wagner said earlier about the fact that, you know, if you work here in the city and you serve the residents of the city of Marlborough, you deserve to be able to afford to live here. And so anything that we can be doing, we should be doing. So I think that's very important. The only other thing I wanted to add is the City of Waltham's language, and Mr. Solicitor, I'm sure you will change this to make it correct, but it says the signature of the Secretary of the Massachusetts Department of Housing and Community Development. I don't believe there is a secretary. I think that's a department, so there would be a commissioner, but the governor's also filing a bill that's going to change that, that's going to provide a new Secretary of Housing. So whatever we need for make sure that the right signatures are there, I'll call that out.
Okay, and I'm sure that that would be something the solicitor would look at. I guess I wasn't conscious that there is no secretary of the DHCD. All right, so we're all in agreement then that that gets added in place of what I have for A, which also removes that ability to buy out.
Yes. And Madam Chair, in item F, the phasing out of the minimum of 99 years for perpetuity,
I'm sorry?
that's in item 1.
And then we could get rid of F completely?
No, just strike the minimum of 99 years, just say in perpetuity.
But I don't know if we need it if we're specifying it in here. Maybe that could be another one for the solicitor. Do we need to keep it?
Or
And if
where it needs to
so,
be.
all right, then let's go to the next page. I have striking the alternate site. The current language allows a developer to not put the affordable in the building that they're building, but to find somewhere else. I don't know that anybody has ever done that, because I'm not sure where they would put them, so I just said get rid of it. Is that one still okay to keep as deleted? Councilor Navin?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it is, and fortunately, we have not seen a lot of that, but I think we've seen that in other communities, you know, throughout kind of the history of development, where people have kind of created areas where, you know, people are sent for affordable housing and not integrated, and, you know, the studies continue to show that, you know, the best sort of housing plan is where, you know, folks are together, and it should not be isolated. So I think that's very important.
All right, so then the developments of 19 or fewer is deleted by my amendment. I think we would still need to keep that deletion to make sense with everything else we've done. And the next one, number 3, it's the provisions of this section shall not apply to a special permit for an existing retirement community or the expansion of an existing retirement community. And I had struck out the part of the expansion and added in shall apply to any new retirement community or expansion of an existing retirement community. So that for those that got to not build the affordables for existing because they didn't have to, if they want to add more, they will have to have affordable.
Madam Chair, can I add one thing to that piece? So one thing I want to mention here is that, and I don't know the history of this particular paragraph, but DHCD's policy for age-restricted units is that, or sometimes they're called 55-plus units, is that if those units are not available for folks under the age of 18 to reside in, that those units, even if they're affordable, will not count for the SHI, the state's list. So that's possibly the genesis of this section, though it may not be. That doesn't mean, obviously, they can't be affordable. They just may not count for the state list. So just something to be aware of.
Okay, does that impact anybody's desire to change this? Councilor Wagner?
My question would be, so I would be okay with it not counting towards the number, but I mean, there's older individuals that would love to live in those places, but it changes when one's retired, so you're not necessarily making an income, so it feels like it would be more difficult to, I don't know how that would work with basing it on, if it's based on income, like a person could have millions and millions of dollars of assets. I don't know how that works, how you would qualify the person, I guess. I don't know if that would change. I don't know enough about the finances. Would it make it more complicated and actually be effective if we change that?
I don't, we sort of had a little discussion about this before the meeting. I know that there are multiple people living in New Horizons, where my father-in-law lived, that probably have millions of dollars to their name, but their income is 80% of the state's level. But they can certainly afford to live there, but there are other people who can't afford to move in there because they don't have the $50,000 that they require up front. So, and that's just one place. I'm not sure how anybody else works it. So I guess, I don't know. I think if we have the provisions of this section, then I would think that the income piece that we have counts for this, even if the numbers don't count for the state numbers. They would still be paying 80%, or that would be the guideline.
Just to follow up on that, so my question would be, would it achieve the goal that we're going for? Because the goal for me would be for that 55-plus type communities to be able, for it to be accessible to people who have more modest means. And I'm concerned that it might end up, putting something like that in place might have a person who's got, say, a tremendous amount of assets, and the income that they get doesn't count as earned income, and so therefore a person with a lot of means would just end up getting to buy that property at a reduced price. So it would be beneficial to that person, but not achieve the goal. We think we're trying to address the goal or address the problem we're trying to address.
Yeah, and I guess that's the income is the piece, so I don't know how anybody else, income, you might have other means of money besides income. So that's a question for any of these, that we're saying this is the median income, now we're going to take 80 and 50% of that income. I would think that would still apply to people in the over 55, and then it'll just be up to those owners to decide.
Madam Chair.
Councilor Navin.
May I just, if as the solicitor noted, there may be a reason where it would not count anyways, is this perhaps, should we find a different vehicle where we can make those requirements and set it right? A lot of the stuff in here is getting tied back to state statute and to federal formulas. Is there a different way that we could perhaps look at doing this, where we could make the requirements that are not, and I don't know what kind of language we would need to put in there, but right, I mean, it has to get very specific about someone's liquidity and versus somebody's, capital gains that they're going to cash in from an investment account, right? I mean, it gets very, very complicated, and if we're not going to be able to count it anyways, not that this is only about counting it, but perhaps there's a different vehicle that we should maybe continue to look at for this.
Councilor, Madam Chair.
Councilor Ossing.
So, seeing the questions we have on this, it's probably best not to play with it right now and leave it as is, because if you're driving to get it done before the March 13th meeting, and we have that many questions, it's going to be I think a lot of work on someone's part, read into that solicitor, to figure that out, and I think he's got enough on his plate right now that, I think a little more in-depth look on our part, not have to feel that we're rushing it to change it, so I may want to just consider leaving item 3 as is, for now.
Is that okay with everybody? My guess is there's going to be more coming at some point anyway, so we can just revert back to the original, or leave the original? Okay. Number 4 is marked as being stricken. The provisions of this section shall not apply to projects which are granted special permit within the Marlborough Village District. That was one of the first things I went for. It's like, why did we do that? Everybody's okay with keeping that?
Or striking it?
Keeping the striking? Okay.
That's fine.
Madam Chair, so the reason for doing that was initially to entice folks to build downtown. We're 2014, do the math, 9 years in, and have got nothing to show for it so far. So I'm not sure if that was a detriment or a help. I mean, you know, it's just, the intention was, we'll waive the requirement to get people to build downtown, but no one's built downtown without having it, so.
Right, and some of them for downtown are mixed use, which is site plan, so they didn't count anyway, or don't count. Then the Roman numeral 3 was just the solicitor's way of fixing language by amending Chapter 650 zoning, inserting the following sentence at the end: floor usage in a mixed-use development shall conform to subsection 2 of the definition of mixed use set forth in section 650-5, which we need to go back to have a discussion on that part of this anyway, so. So if there's no other comments, we can start back at the beginning of this, which was the amending the definition of mixed use. The solicitor took out the use entirely and put in new, so if you need to have the definition, I could read it to you, or we'll just go with, is there an issue with what is in here? And I don't know, since this has been around for a while, if anybody's had a chance, or when you had a chance, if you marked it up with questions or concerns.
Just clarification, are we, I was lost a little bit on this. So we're talking about section 1, but there isn't any strike-throughs.
It's replaced completely. If you read it, it says subsection B, mixed use, is deleting the definition in its entirety and replacing it with the following. So you need to look at what the original language was to know the difference.
And where is the replacement? Help me understand.
The replacement is what's in the document.
Where's the original definition? Is that?
Oh, okay, so what I'm looking at, this is what we're keeping?
This is what would be,
Okay.
what would be approved.
All right, that's what I was confused over, thank you.
Madam Chair, if it ends up being helpful to the committee, I could always put together a red line that shows, you know, in a comparison version, if that's something that's helpful.
Thank you.
Basically, I think what it deleted was the language that talked about the mixed use. The mix of uses shall be balanced and compatible and contribute to a vibrant downtown atmosphere. That's gone because our mixed use isn't just downtown. And it really just cleared up. The current language says ground floors of buildings fronting streets or public access ways shall be reserved for non-residential uses except dwelling units shall be allowed on ground floors of buildings if, number 1, the building is set behind another building that has commercial uses on the ground floor, or number 2, the residential portion of the ground floor of a building is set behind street front non-residential uses within the same building. So a lot of that is still there. But nobody has any issues with that language that we have?
I don't have any, Madam Chair, sorry.
Yes.
I don't have any issues, but I want to be clear that the way this is written means that mixed use would be included, so, right? So the housing that's part of a mixed-use development would be included in what we're talking about for affordable housing percentages?
Yes, because if you read, I don't remember where it is,
It's on page 3, Madam Chair. So it's item 4 that we just struck the requirement, if I may, Madam Chair.
the provisions of the section shall not apply to projects that are granted special permit, but mixed use didn't ever have, mixed use, so somewhere in the code is talking about mixed use being by right. Except that it needs a site plan, so that's why the language in Roman numeral 2A adds the all site plan approvals granted for multifamily dwellings as part of a mixed-use development would have affordable.
Madam Chair?
Councilor Doucette.
Yeah, I thought mixed use was by right in the Marlborough Village and the Wayside District. We gotta get back to the table, which is not listed
I
here,
think you got to go to that table of uses,
Yeah.
which,
right.
we've got so many.
I think by right, it's only those 2 locations, but I could be wrong, that's something.
Yeah, and mixed use doesn't necessarily have to have housing. So,
By definition.
but a mixed use, it does have housing. And I think
Right.
that's why site plan multifamily dwelling is part of a mixed-use development. Otherwise, mixed use could be mixing lots of stuff. So you got to go to the table of uses to find out where mixed use can be.
Right, I thought the definition of mixed use is a combination of residential and business.
Yeah.
If it's non-residential, then it's not mixed use, it's just a variety of businesses.
It could be a business use.
Business use, but it's
Yes.
not mixed, it's just
Right.
business. And you can have, you can have a business use and no residential, then it's, but by right, I think it's only those 2 locations that allow mixed use.
Right. So I think this just cleaned up where the dwelling units in a mixed use
Madam
would go.
Chair, so if you go to the table of uses, multifamily dwellings, that has the footnotes 4 and 2, which you gotta go to then 650-18. And when you go to 650-18, item 42 says, mixed-use development, including multi-family residential uses, shall not be subject to special provision shall not be subject to special permit provisions for multifamily uses. In the Wayside District, multifamily dwellings shall be allowed only as part of mixed-use development. Mixed-use developments may include vertically mixed-use buildings, single, horizontally, or multiple buildings that create a mixed use on a single parcel. Each individual building may include a single use with multiple uses occurring next to each other. So it really doesn't say anything other than shall not be subject to special permit provisions for multifamily uses. So is that what's,
So it has the Wayside District and not Marlborough Village.
So is there another section that I missed that actually needs to be amended? Or does the fact that we put the provisions of section, we deleted that part, that the provisions of this section shall not apply to projects that are granted special permit within Marlborough Village District?
Madam Chair, I was going to say, sorry. So if the intent of the committee is to cover all multifamily projects and all mixed-use developments that include multifamily, if that's the intent of this, then I can play around a bit more to make sure we're covering that in 650-26A. I think that's the way it's conceptually drafted right now.
And yes, that was my goal, was to try to make sure that all of that was taken care of. So if those numbers, which are in a different zoning part, need to be, would they need to be changed, or would this just make them null and void, supersede, whatever?
Right, we could play around with the language. That was one of the things that I was, I think I mentioned that we might need to tweak anyway, depending on what the committee would like to do. But if the goal remains the way it's written, then we may beef up a little bit that section to say, address any inconsistencies, you know, to make sure we're capturing all these developments that we're looking to capture. So.
Does everybody agree with that, that a mixed use that has multifamily housing part of it needs to be affordable?
Yes.
Included, okay. All right, so solicitor, I don't know if you can rework this. Does the committee feel like they want to have another quick meeting to look at it and make sure we agree with it, so that that's what we would be moving forward? Councilor Doucette?
Madam Chair, the mayor hasn't provided his feedback yet as well.
He indicated in the email that he was looking at coming with information later, but I guess I get the sense that he might be thinking more about the 3A sort of affordable piece and not this. Although the meeting that we had, Councilor Ossing and I had with him, was more his concern with the more affordables we have, the more people who have Section 8 vouchers would be taking advantage of those. I think the language in here that says 70% go to eligible residents of Marlborough helps alleviate some of that concern, so that a property owner, knowing that they're guaranteed this amount of money with the Section 8 versus, and I guess that, to me, that's not relevant. I don't really care who they are. I just want them, I want affordable units. And if Section 8 people are affordable, then let them move in. Councilor Wagner.
I would just follow up on that. I mean, so technically I hear that and everybody deserves to have housing, but I think going to that policy, I also am concerned about the people who are already serving here, serving the people of Marlborough, and all those very important professions, and that it doesn't make sense as a community where those very important people like public safety and teachers and that can't afford to live here. So there is an element of, or if you're already here working for the city, it would be great to figure out how to help them figure out how they can live here. So, I mean, I get it. Everybody needs housing, and I'm concerned about the well-being of our people in our city.
That are here, all right. So that language is there.
Yeah.
Councilor Navin?
No, and I would just kind of add further onto that. I mean, it's a little bit apples and oranges when you're talking about Section 8, which is a housing voucher program for individuals in the community who need assistance to be able to, you know, to be able to make rent up. And then there's setting, you know, to working with these developers and folks to set kind of the market rate and be able to have some affordability. So, I mean, I think both policies would be very helpful to kind of increase affordability. So I don't think one negates the other. I think they can work in tandem very well. I don't know, I mean, if we do need, I'm comfortable, I think the discussion here, I think everybody's kind of on the same page, so I don't know that we need another meeting, but if we do, would we be able to add it to the meeting on the 6th and then suspend for the 13th, or do you need action faster than that?
We do have,
Respectful of the solicitor's time and plate that's already full.
well, I would guess if the solicitor's giving us language for this meeting that we already have for the 6th, it would be in proper form, so we wouldn't need to suspend to send it back to him. I guess we could then suspend.
I'm fine, I'm just trying to
On the
streamline. If we
13th,
want another meeting, can we add it?
Vote on
then?
it?
So, Madam Chair, so
Councilor
I just,
Ossing.
so again, when you're voting it on the 13th, I just want the council to be aware of, anybody objects, then it dies, right? Because we don't have another meeting in time, because, you know, when you go through the 4 stages of an ordinance, the last question is, does anyone object to passage in one evening? So just so that you all know that that element is out there. I mean, that's the risk of running it up to the deadline.
Do you want to just see something emailed and be able to read through it? Councilor Wagner?
I would request, given that timeline and what President Ossing just said, that it would be beneficial, I think, to make sure the entire council understands that criteria, and then there'd be an opportunity to come to the meeting on the 6th and get all the questions addressed there, so as not to miss everything and then show up for the city council meeting and have it die because they miss these opportunities to really understand it more.
Well, they could still come on the 6th and still vote to not approve it that night, I guess. It's an ordinance change, so anybody can object if they want to. I would hope even if they don't vote to approve this, they wouldn't object, but that's a concern.
I'm trying doing it from memory. We talking about the next urban meeting? I thought that was the 6th, wasn't it?
The urban, right, I guess what would have typically happened would be I could report this out for this coming Monday's meeting. It would lay on the table, or it would be referred to the solicitor, and we would still have to vote on it on the 13th, because we don't have another meeting. So we're sort of a rock and hard place regardless, because this just kind of didn't get taken up as soon as it should have. But if everybody's comfortable with having this back on the agenda, I mean, it can be a quick discussion, I would hope. Everybody could get a clean copy. We'd just make sure it was what we all agreed to, and then I can report it out on the 13th and cross our fingers. Does that sound okay with everybody? So we'll just...
I think if you're giving your report next Monday, right, encourage folks, you know, for Councilor Wagner's point, right, encourage folks to come to the meeting on the 6th. There's finance right before it anyways, right? So, you know, hopefully we can have a larger discussion and address any concerns.
And I guess I didn't really plan on doing a report on, but I can just report that we met and we had lots of discussion with some changes, so please come to the meeting on the 6th, which with finance also being, hopefully people would come. All right, I don't think there was any, well, I didn't have anything else, so unless anybody else had any questions, concerns, we can kind of leave this in committee.
You looking for a motion to adjourn?
That would be appropriate, I guess, if...
Motion to adjourn?
All right, it's been moved and seconded to adjourn. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is 8:17.